Well, good afternoon, Scott Baker, and welcome back, Mallory Stacy, in the
Thank you
building.
for having me back. I
Sure
either
thing.
totally bombed the last one, you gave me a do-over, or I just have to do it again.
Listen, this is how we roll on Lead Better. We just kind of go, and I feel like I actually shouldn't be here because I sort of feel like Mikey and Mallory sounds like a classic FM radio morning team, right?
Oh, what a great,
It's Mikey and Mallory in the morning. Right?
What a great sounding little thing,
More
too.
Indian ring to it. I'm with you.
It is. It's right there. All right. So Lead Better. Here we go. We're talking about today's field note. And the field note is entitled, Be Careful About How You Ask Your Leader for Advice. So, and I actually think that I got an email today, and this really surprised me. So I'm going to start with it. So I got an email from somebody that I met, I think 2 years ago, a young person. And they were writing me today via LinkedIn, went to my email, then we exchanged, and they were asking for advice. However, this person who I had not talked to in like 2 years said, I was going to write and ask you for advice, but I read today's field note, so I'm asking for your perspective. Now, listen, I'm not saying I would have ignored this person's email. I probably would have responded. But if I had gotten 100 emails like that today, which one would I have absolutely paid attention to? The young woman who said, I read today's field note already, and I'm asking you for your perspective.
Oh, yeah. When she actually takes time to listen to the content that you're responsible to produce, and she responds in that kind of way, like, yeah, absolutely. You're like, okay, here's someone who's actually listening to me.
Scott, we know
Of
the keys
course.
to your heart now is obviously through field notes. But here's my question. Did she follow up with the question actually being a perspective, or was she actually still asking advice?
She was very clear about the thing that she was asking me to get engaged on, but we are going to talk. And I think that she probably will probably have a good exchange and maybe about, perspective. But here's the thing. In looking at this, underlying this is a uncomfortable truth. And I want to know because we're all three of us in the advice giving profession. And the truth is, because I read an essay about this recently, that people ask for advice all the time and they rarely follow it. Mm-hmm. They want to have advisors, but they don't really want to get advice. So we'll get to the problem about leaders and their own advice and perspective and all of that. But do you feel like that's true? Like, do you feel like when people give you advice, or if you've had advice, do you only take a sliver of it? Like, are we all just sort of like asking for advice all the time? Like, pay attention to me, but then we're ignoring the good and wise things people are telling us?
Go ahead, Mallory.
I was going to say, if that's the case, and it's who you're getting advice from, are you truly asking from somebody that you want to get advice from, that you respect and honor their viewpoint? Or are you asking because they just happen to be my manager and therefore I have to ask their advice on this?
That's a good point. Mikey?
My thought immediately went to the fact that our coaches oftentimes recognize that senior leaders don't want to do assessments. They don't want to, when they do leadership development, they know that they don't want to do a training. If anything, they're hungry for just tell me what to do, but not necessarily let's learn a little bit more about each other. So if we've always talked about that in terms of the way that senior leaders really want to do leadership development, but you're exactly right. Do they actually take these very directive, actionable behaviors that we give them and start applying to them? Once the advice is right there and it's take it or leave it, it's hard to take it, right? Yeah. It oftentimes is.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, I feel like some of that's the art, though, of coaching, not the science part, but this person says, should I quit my job? And it's first of all, I don't want to make that decision for you, even if the writing's clear on the wall. What should we think about when it comes to whether you stay or when you leave? That process is where it's probably on coaching to decide, does this person actually want advice or a viewpoint or a behavior? Or do they really need to pull it back and think about the process, in which case it's my job as a coach not to just give a viewpoint if they don't even want to take it or own it.
So is it a case-by-case basis for you, Mallory, as to whether or not you're going to give your opinion with conviction? If you're convinced they need to quit, right? But you also want it to be their decision, but you're convinced they need to quit.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I mean, this might not be true for everybody, but that's the art. I'm not going to be provocative simply to be provocative, even if I see clearly writing on the wall. Because
Right.
it's like a parent telling their teenage daughter, you should not date that guy. He's a drummer and he's going nowhere.
Right.
They're not going to say yes to that. It has to be like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the options. Let's think through it together as a coach.
Now we do want to hear more about your teenage conversations, Mallory. But
Yeah,
I think
she doesn't have teenagers, but she's still having these
yeah,
conversations.
she's remembering.
We have
So
time to talk about this.
we do, yeah. We can keep going. Now, look, I want to say just for everybody that's listening or watching, we are going to get to the heart of the field note, which is really about when you come to your leader, are you asking for advice or are you asking for their perspective, right? A perspective, a mental model is different than saying I want marching orders, right? So does that lead to a better discussion? And there's some interesting dynamics on how that plays out, because if you come to your leader and you're asking for marching orders, and then you don't do what we just talked about, which is if you're not following the advice, you've created actually a bigger problem for yourself. So in this advice, this is advice to the junior person who's coming to the leader. Ask for the mental model, right? Now, I guess the question, Mallory, which is because you're dealing with the leaders that you're coaching all the time, is are you careful that even in coaching them, that you would say to them, if someone comes to you asking for marching orders, that maybe you as the wise leader should frame that as here's the model or here's a perspective rather than here's what I think you should do?
Yeah.
Does it go both ways?
Yeah, it's funny that you're going to talk about this because I just got off the phone about an hour ago with somebody who does listen into this. So she's going to know I'm talking about her. But she has a direct report who said, I want to get promoted. What do I need? What do I need to do to get promoted?
Right.
She knows. I mean, she has the list. She knows exactly what it is, but she wants her to have some ownership. And so we talked about this isn't one that you say these 5 things, boom, 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 but instead says, what do you think you need to do to get to that senior position?
Right.
Let's think about it. Let's come back. Let's talk about it. But purposely, we'll talk about the path. Let's talk about the way you want to get there. Let's talk about the approach. Because the other thing is she might not know exactly what this person's goals and dreams are. So she's laying out a path to that position that is what she knows can get her there quickest. So yeah, I do coach, to your point, coach the manager to not give the exact advice, but instead talk about it.
Yeah. So the field note works in both directions, I guess. Now we're going to advance. We're going to solve all of your problems because, well, one, Mikey, I think that the issue of whether people follow advice or not, probably you and I are accustomed, particularly having kids that are getting up into their regular adult years, or in my case, I've got several that are full, blown adults, where advance notice to Mallory, they don't always follow your advice. Yeah. Now, the truth is, maybe Mikey and I are just bad at how we give advice. Maybe that's why you're a world-class executive coach, right?
Scott, I have a 3-year-old, and she has mastered this field note because she used to say to me, Mommy, go pick out my dress this morning. And I'd pick it out, and it would inevitably be not what she wanted. She'd lose her mind. So then she started saying, hey, can you get some dresses, and I will pick? So now, mastered. I'm going and getting 3 or 4. She picks. I really need to rework the power dynamic in this relationship. But she's essentially given me the perspective, not the dress.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because 4 or 5 field notes back, we talked about A players, B players, and C players, and how all leaders have a tendency to kind of classify people into these buckets. And so we gave a helpful framework to think of A players as those who don't need, all they need is a goal and they're good to go. B players is people who need a goal, but then they also need the strategy. And C players need to be told what to do, even after you've articulated the goal and the strategy. They also need very specific marching orders. So it sounds like your daughter thinks of you as a B player here, Mallory.
That's right.
Yeah. And so, but the reason that we bring this up here is because if we have people who are coming to us asking for advice that they're clearly asking as a C player, it's still our job, even though we might give them the C level details in that moment, it's still our job as leaders to get them to the point where they're B players and B players to A players eventually. So it's not like we're stuck with them constantly giving those C players directives that are very specific every single time. It's our job to elevate those folks, right? However, the field note isn't written from that perspective. The field note is written to like, you've got a senior leader that you're dealing with. And so in this moment of like how we manage up, it's I thought it was kind of interesting that we chose to write it this way, right? Mm-hmm. Why did we write it this way as opposed to, there's just as much rich detail here if we wrote it from the other perspective, but we don't usually write them from a leading up point of view. Yeah.
And go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt, Mallory.
No, I was just going to say, we do have so much content on leading your leader. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of framing and how I purposely frame my question just fits in really nicely to the rest of how am I thinking about my conversation with my leader, not from the manipulative standpoint, which I think is the dirty feel of this one, is that you have to stay out of that and have the right intent, but more of I need to make sure that I'm being really intentional with what I ask so that both I'm getting the perspective I want and also showing up a bit more peer-like.
Yeah. It sounds to me like we would all, in every direction, be better if we were asking for perspective, if we were sharing perspective. We talk about this even in the odd situation around, let me put it over here, where we talk about giving directive feedback, and it's not a good idea to do evaluative feedback in a game time. Specific feedback. So not like, hey, you're doing great out there, or you really sucked in the first quarter, but I need you to step here. I need you to do this. I need you to look for this player. I need you to to follow up your jab with 2 counters, right? Whatever that advice is specific. So in those cases, sometimes that works. But in the case here of asking for perspective, I think as a general rule, you'd be better off as a parent being like, well, let me give you some perspective. Let me give you some ideas to think about. Yeah. And we'd always be better to say, can you, and I think maybe leaders would start to feel abused if you always came in saying like, well, can you share your philosophy on this? Like sometimes you want to get real tactical insight from a true, like you're an apprentice and they're the master, right? So, but you can walk toward that without it getting very specific, because if they share something like that, and the field note says this, by the way, which is if you actually do get direct advice from the leader and you've decided not to follow that advice, you can't just not follow it. You actually have to come back into that conversation and say, I really appreciated your perspective. I think and you might do it in a very admired leadership way. This was brilliant. That was a really great idea. I'm going to actually apply this in another area. In this case, I don't think it fully maps. So here's what I'm going to do. Like you make sure that you've closed the loop on that entire exchange. Almost forgot to bring that up in this whole conversation. I don't know if anybody has anything to add to that point.
No, I think it's important. You're basically saying, you can telegraph to your leader that you want to be micromanaged.
Yeah, right.
Just by the way you phrase the question. And nobody really wants that. No one actually wants it. So don't phrase it that way, right? And it's going to be an inadvertent thing. And then what does your leader think about you if you are phrasing it in such a way? Does this person really wants to be micromanaged, right? Now, if you're dealing with a micromanager, then this is obviously the way that you need to approach your leader, so that you don't accidentally step in it in that way as well. So I love the advice. Think approach, not action.
I want to go back to what Scott said too, double down on, I think it's key that whether or not you ask the question for perspective or you ask to get an answer, if you've gotten an answer from your leader and you essentially got marching orders, even if you were trying to go for perspective, they gave you a marching order, you went a different way, that follow-up, that come back to it so that you don't look like, I heard you, I'm choosing not to listen, it's key.
Right.
I'm with you.
Well, here's the problem we're now in. I asked ChatGPT for some advice the other day, and then I went back and I said, you gave me advice, and I didn't do it. And now today, I'm locked out of all my bank accounts, and my electricity has been turned off.
You blew it with your digital overlords.
Yes, exactly right. Yes, I'm joking. But by the way, that's a good question, which is how do you interact, with an AI?
Yeah.
Do you ask for perspective or advice?
Yeah, no, and they have a tendency to go right to bullet points and advice in a way that frustrates a lot of people, right? Mm-hmm. Some people love to use AI that way because they're still in a mode where AI is just an advanced, search database, right?
Well, and then that's the prompt error. That's the prompt. Like then you need to say, I want to sit with this problem for a little bit. Give me the 27 or 2070 questions that would help me get to an answer around this problem. So
Right.
I'm not going to blame the underlords, ChatGPT, if you're listening. I'm going to more so blame the prompt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alex, of course, never has any of these problems. But by the way,
Yeah.
you actually you hit something with there, which is, so much of this AI language already is influencing the language of our entire culture, so that now we are likely to talk about this and say, when you go to your leader, your actual human being leader, you can say, well, what is my prompt going to be for my conversation with the leader?
That's a fun way to think about it.
That's exactly right. Exactly. This is just the art of prompt, just like we think about the art of prompt with AI. Oh, spot on.
Yeah.
Weird world.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much, Mallory. You're our
you,
first two-time guest, I think. When you get to 5, we'll get one of those SNL
Right.
bathrobes
Yeah, right.
with the big 5 on it. Yeah. That'll be it. Until then,
See
though.
you guys every day next week then.
See everybody. Yeah.
All right. Bye now.